Why does it seem as if Sith apprentices are so much stronger than Jedi Masters? Greetings, students of the Force, and welcome back to the archives. This is a question that we've brought up before on the channel, but as always, we are ever expanding our library of research with new information when it becomes available. And recently, a new scene for us to visualize has presented itself in The Acolyte, where Chimere, who is revealed to be the Stranger, absolutely demolishes a team of Jedi. And this brought back the question in our minds: why are young Sith, usually apprentice level, so good at killing Jedi Knights or even Jedi Masters? While we know Chimere is being portrayed as a Sith Master, we're not entirely convinced that he is one yet, or even if he does turn out to be the Master, which means he had enough power as an apprentice to overthrow his own Master. And of course, we can look at other Sith apprentices such as Maul and Savage Opress, who are impressively powerful despite only having trained for a very short amount of time in the ways of a Sith, with both of the Zabrak brothers making a speciality of killing Jedi Masters and even Jedi Council members. So, join us today, my friends, as we reopen the holocron and find out exactly what makes Sith apprentices so strong enough to take on the highest ranks of the Jedi Order. Before we delve into it, we can say that this isn't always the case. There are plenty of Jedi Masters who are more than capable of holding their own against a student of the Sith, but this mainly happens during the Old Republic era. The amount of Jedi that are able to defeat Sith greatly diminishes the more we get into the Rule of Two. And even though the Bainite lineage of Sith are not meant to be known for their combat ability, they are still incredibly formidable, such as what we've seen here with Chimere, who is confident enough to nearly take out every Jedi on Kofar. And then of course we have Maul, who as a teenager was able to take down Qui-Gon Jinn, student of the finest swordsman in the Jedi Order in Dooku. And even before he secured the kill, he was handling both Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan for an extended period of time. The point being, there is certainly something different about the training of these young Sith, something that allows them to compete on a much higher level than should be possible. So, to answer this, we have prepared 6 reasons why Sith apprentices are so strong at such a young age. Our first reason is a very important one. The Sith don't just train anybody. An important thing to note about the Sith Order is the distinction they make between who they do and don't allow to become one of them. The Jedi, on the other hand, have made a habit of seeking out anyone in the galaxy who shows a bit of Force sensitivity. It's an extremely rare trait to have beyond the natural number of midichlorians to even allow one to touch the Force, and the Jedi wanting to spread the knowledge of the Force and their way of using it will take anyone as an infant who shows their natural aptitude, no matter how weak they are. But the Sith are far more choosy. They are willing to wait until someone has real promise and makes themselves known. This is why there are always dramatically less Sith than Jedi, even in eras where the Sith and the Jedi have enough numbers in their ranks to form entire armies. The Sith only want to lay a groundwork of training someone who is going to be worth their time and effort. Midichlorians may not be everything in the power of a Force sensitive, but they are a very good indicator of potential and the immediate yield of power. Finding and cultivating these bright torches of Force energy and ensuring that they are old enough to have been wronged by the galaxy. This begins the making of the perfect Sith apprentice. And when they find the young person who is just the right amount of natural talent, we move on to the next reason. That being that their training culls the weakness out of the individual. Once the master has found a student, they will pressure cook them for a time so as to squeeze out every drop of their maximum power. Sith training is excruciatingly brutal, with it being more like straight up torture than anything else. Sith students will suffer physically, mentally, and emotional abuse in order to draw from the dark side. The pain and rage they have already been dealt in life will be magnified by what their master then puts them through. The pain becomes agony, the rage becomes hatred. Both of these chew a hole into the very soul of the apprentice, which then becomes a wellspring of power. But besides this, many Sith Masters will force their students to remain in a constant state of survival mode by making them struggle for everything, whether that be food, knowledge, or security. The young apprentice will develop a predator's mentality like a wild animal, someone who will do anything to survive and please their master. Darth Maul himself spent his formative years in a training facility on Mustafar, deprived of all human contact, save from the rare visit that he got from Palpatine, who would only pay him backhanded compliments at the very best. Much of Maul's training involved him being sent to wild frontier planets to kill monsters and creatures, defeating enemies that no mere mortal could slay. Savage Opress was simply tortured again and again by Dooku until he was forced to bring out his great power, and then his first mission to kill a Jedi without a lightsaber. In Palpatine's very first training session, Darth Plagueis would take him to an icy planet and force the boy to climb up a sheer cliff on top of which Plagueis was meditating. In below freezing temperatures, without proper clothes or tools, the inexperienced young Palpatine had to use his fingernails to claw his way to the ice bank. And at the time, he had not mastered drawing upon the Force as a reliable ally. Once Palpatine was finally at the top though, Plagueis rewarded him by drawing his own lightsaber and delivering several burns and gashes on Palpatine's body in order to teach him pain. Plagueis would do this again and again, only pausing to give Palpatine a lecture about the dark side before continuing with the torture. What this does is it gives Sith apprentices a lot more power in a lot less time, which is all a direct contrast to how the Jedi function. On their side of things, the Jedi allow power in the Force to flow naturally, to join them as it so chooses. To a Jedi, knowledge is power, and quietly meditating on the light side was how one grows closer to the Force. This, of course, was how they taught their Padawans as well. The Jedi believed that the active pursuit of strength was against their way and was a perversion of the Jedi Order, so without them actively moving towards gaining power, it left them vulnerable to very young Sith who had already gained 20 years of experience with the dark side in a third of the time, which actually brings us neatly to our next point. The dark side gives destructive power very quickly. As Yoda once said, the dark side may not be stronger, but it is quicker, easier, and more seductive. That quicker and easier part should not be ignored. The dark side is very eager to join someone in the heat of the moment, and it entices with a staggering amount of power. This newfound strength will cost the user in the future though, but in the moment, it is a very good trade. Windu explains that the dark side is a torch that burns bright, but that quickly burns out. Sith apprentices use the brightness of the torch to unleash their fury on unsuspecting opponents. The light is all about balance and seeking the flourishment of life. Its power is a lot more subtle and profound, but the Sith only see power in the raw physical sense, so that is what they train and prioritize. Since everything we've talked about so far was meant to bring out as much of the student's dark side as possible, that, combined with the next category, makes a terrifying apprentice and a terrifying enemy. Sith training is almost purely focused on combat. In the first years of a Sith apprentice's life, combat is the first truth that they learn. Sith only begin learning about the deeper mysteries of the dark side later down the road when they become the rank of Dark Lord. But as we've seen, apprentices must carry out their master's will. This often includes going to dangerous places or killing dangerous people. A Sith apprentice that can't effectively kill is useless. By contrast, many Jedi are focused on entirely different things in their study of the Force. At worst, their saber skill is something of an afterthought as they search answers through the light. Even Jedi Guardians are encouraged to keep a balance in how much time they're spent in combat training versus their other studies. Really, only Jedi Sentinels are encouraged to prioritize combat training above all else. This was different in the Old Republic, since the Sith were far more prevalent, and every Jedi needed to know how to fight them. In this era, the Jedi put a huge emphasis on lightsaber training, but this bred the adverse issue of causing Jedi to stray away from the light side. When a Jedi focuses too much on harming others and not on maintaining peace, they may become strong warriors, but they turn out to be bad Jedi. This very thing happened during the Ruusan campaign during the War of Light and Darkness. Jedi General Hoth and his troopers were swaying dangerously close to the dark side because of how much tenacity they had and were fighting with, going so far as to train Jedi Padawans in combat before throwing them on the front lines of a war. By the time of the Rule of Two, the Jedi were correcting their ways and were trying to be more in tune with the flow of the Force, focus on dissolving conflict non-violently. While still being skilled warriors, the Jedi were skilled largely against non-Force sensitives, so when a dark side wielder arrived, it was a very big deal, and the Jedi Sentinels were sent out to deal with the problem personally. But in the case of fighting a battle-hardened Sith apprentice, the Jedi would crumble nearly immediately. As we saw in the Acolyte, the Jedi are completely unprepared to fight against the aggression of a Sith Lord, which leads us to our next point. Sith fight with viciousness. This is something the Jedi are not prepared for. The Jedi are familiar with aggressive forms like Jem-So and Ataru, but being aggressive is different than being vicious. Jedi who use these forms exercise restraint and know when to push and when to pull back on their enemy. Sith, though, never do this. They're bloodthirsty fighters that are ready to gut whoever steps in their path. Chimere, despite being extremely young, was able to kill an entire team of Jedi. None of them were familiar enough with his lightsaber form to even properly fight against it. And by context clues, we can surmise that Chimere uses Juyo, which is Form 7, the form that is most closely associated with the dark side due to how wild and unpredictable it is. Form 7 is known for eviscerating opponents and ripping through even the best defenses. Yord was terrified of him, stating that he didn't follow the rules of combat and that there was no rhyme or reason to his movements. These words just go to show how out of touch the Jedi of the Rule of Two era truly were when facing a true dark side adept. They believe Sith will follow the rules of engagement. They think that all lightsaber duels should be the same, and they don't expect the Sith to fight like a wild animal. And that's what brings us to our final point. The Sith will use anything and everything to their advantage. While not seen very often with apprentices, we do see Chimere utilizing the dirty trick of wearing cortosis armor, which is a brittle metal that shorts out lightsabers whenever they strike it. Sith are known to do this sort of thing all the time. They aren't afraid to use other things to their advantage during fights. Historically, this meant using magic objects such as amulets, or even enchanted pieces of armor to give them the slightest edge. In Chimere's case, he went into a fight with a team of Jedi, wearing something that would certainly help him out when fighting with multiple lightsabers. Sith apprentices may be savage when they fight, but they are also very intelligent. They plan, they prepare, they know their enemy going into a duel. They are ready to do what it takes to win. Darth Maul was willing to throw his pride aside as a warrior and use a dirty trick against Qui-Gon Jinn, smacking his chin with the hilt of his lightsaber in order to pull off the stab. This is not something a warrior with honor would ever do, and although Darth Maul would later say that he regretted doing this, it was more so a sign of his own disappointment in his skill rather than pulling off a dirty move. In summary, Sith apprentices are able to kill Jedi Masters because they are selected from amongst the strongest Force sensitives in the galaxy. They are put through inhuman training conditions to stoke the fires of the darkness within them. That power is already potent, as it gives larger bursts of power, all of which is honed through nothing but the purest of combat training. And they do not obey the rules of combat at all. They will fight like animals, using whatever they can to their advantage against their enemy. All of this comes together to show why Sith average far more personal victories than the Jedi ever will. But of course, what do you think, my friends? Does our reasoning make sense? And does this now reveal to you the truth of the strength of a Sith apprentice? But now, I leave you with another question. In all of the lore, which Sith apprentice do you believe to be the most powerful? As always, my friends, thank you so much for visiting the archives today as we open a Sith holocron, and as always, may the Force be with you.